Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session today. Thank you so much for attending. We are focused today on neuroinclusion within the workplace. This is to kick off Neurodiversity Celebration Week in conjunction with the Diversity Project. We're really excited to have panelists here today to talk through how employers and leaders can do more to focus on neuroinclusion within the workplace. Just a couple of housekeeping items real quick, and apologies, we've got one member who's still trying to join, so I'm juggling emailing with them. Just from an administrative standpoint, today we will go approximately 40 minutes with the panel discussion and hopefully leaving some time for questions at the end. We are going to have the questions submitted via the chat function, so we won't have a live Q&A, but you can submit questions via the chat, and we'll use those to cover at the end of the session. If we don't get to all of them, we will work within the Diversity Project to pull together a Q&A that we can post after this session. So thank you again for joining us today. Apologies, I'm just frozen. We have with us today Laurie Edmans, as well as Lucy Bond. I think we are waiting hopefully on Meike Bliebenicht to join, but if she isn't able to join, we'll continue on. And then we also have Natalie Gill. So again, today we're going to focus on not the why around neurodiversity. I think those of you who are on the call appreciate and understand the need to have a more neuro-inclusive environment. But what we want to do today is focus more on the how. So how can you go about starting, or how can you go about continuing your journey to focus on neuro-inclusion within the workplace? So I think what we'll do is to kick off with Laurie and have each of the panelists do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll kick off the panel discussion. So Laurie, can I hand it over to you for an intro?
Thank you very much, Sonya, and hello everybody. I'm the co-chair of GAIN, the group for autism, insurance, investment and neurodiversity. I've got to be involved with GAIN because I'm a long-standing industry person, 50 plus years in investments and insurance, and very aware of the talent needs of the industry. But I also, almost by accident, found myself a trustee of a school for autistic children 20 years ago now. I'm still a trustee there, and became aware as our first group of children reached the age of 14 or 15, that there was a black hole in employment the other side of age 18. And I've been working with Ambitious About Autism and with GAIN on a broader platform of neurodiversity since then to try with I coined GAIN's mission, which is to radically improve the employment prospects of neurodivergent people in our industry, raising awareness of the issue, but also wanting to make the match between the talents of neurodiverse people and the talent gaps I know exist in the industry. We've a clear blueprint for how businesses can do that, developed with 30 major businesses across the sector, and we have 17 as from Friday, big businesses, including Aviva, Phoenix and Zurich, who are supporting us. And we're delighted that this session is aimed not just at establishing the case for better workplaces for neurodiverse people, but how to make them so.
Thank you, Laurie. Lucy, could I have you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lucy Bond from Man Group. I have very recently changed roles from head of HR to be our global head of sustainability. As part of my role, I oversee our diversity, equity and inclusion programme. And the theme of neurodiversity has always particularly resonated with me, My youngest sibling has dyslexia, dyspraxia, and some special educational needs. And having watched them progress through school, through navigate daily life, through bullying and low expectations from teachers and peers, it's been a real pleasure to watch them enter the workforce and thrive. They found themselves in a great environment where their skills are appreciated every day, and they're very much valued as part of the team. And that has always spurred me on, ever since I've started working, to play my part in creating that same environment everywhere I have worked.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going to check. I don't know if Meike, have you been able to join? Okay, it doesn't seem like it. So we'll, I think Natalie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Gill. I'm the head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at PGIM and covering EMEA and the APAC region. I have regional leadership across those areas, but I also have global responsibility for our DEI strategy and importantly for our industry engagements. I'm new to PGIM and new to asset management, but not new to financial services. I previously held DEI roles at Santander and at Sumitomo Mitsui Corporate and Investment Bank. And my personal connection to neuroinclusion, I am married to a husband who was diagnosed at 35 with dyslexia. He had spent his entire school life with two very academic, very bright elder brothers, feeling like he was the proverbial runt of the litter and really struggling with that. And it came to light much later on in his life. And also my 16-year-old son has been diagnosed with dyslexia and dyspraxia as well. So I see that personal connection. But more importantly, from an organizational perspective, we have been launching a neuroinclusion program, which I'll talk a little bit about later on, which has been focused more predominantly around autism and looking at how we can be a better employer and support our employees who are on the autistic spectrum as well. So I look forward to talking to you a bit more about that later on.
Great, thank you, Natalie. And I believe we now have Meike on.
Yes, hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm sorry, a few technical difficulties. Always has to be someone. So my name is Meike Bliebenicht and I lead the Neurodiversity program at BP. And before I joined BP 1.5 years ago, I used to work in the financial industry for around about, well, almost 20 years, mainly for HSBC and JP Morgan. And I also headed up the Neurodiversity workstream for the Diversity Project for quite a number of years. I've now stepped back, but I'm still considering myself a friend. My personal connection to neurodiversity is that I was diagnosed with ADHD around about 7 years ago now. And I thought, okay, I now understand myself better and understand these sometimes very pronounced strengths, but also sometimes the challenges I was facing and the really perceived simple tasks I was struggling with. And I wanted to use that information somehow. And so, yeah, hence me joining the Diversity Project. And then at some point during deep dark lockdown thinking, okay, I'd like to make a career change. And that's what took me into my current position and my current role with BP.
Great, thank you, Meike, and thank you everyone for your introductions. I think it's really helpful to have the context and background before we kick off, so thank you. First, Lucy, one of the questions, I think everybody is probably thinking, how do I just go about getting started? What are some of the steps or tips to start building awareness within the organization and focusing more specifically on neuroinclusion? So would you mind speaking a bit to thoughts on that point?
Sure. So when we started, the conversation here at Man Group some years ago, we found what really resonated was when one of our senior leaders revised the structure for one of our investment businesses. And in doing that, very clearly acknowledged that success in our workplace is not necessarily defined by being a leader of people or a people manager, but also by being a subject matter expert. So you can reach the same corporate level through a contribution to the business with your expertise. And that was a very clear way of recognizing the different skills that people bring, how those are equally valued, and was, in itself a very inclusive action. And following that, we invited a thought leader in the neurodiversity space to speak to our senior executive committee, which went very well. And they asked that he came in to see our executive committee, which went similarly extremely well. And everybody really saw the value in supporting a new work stream on this in our workplace. So we've now cascaded that through the organisation. We've held a series of webinars on some of the different types of neurodiversity, which are open to everybody globally. We've held manager masterclasses to give advice and answer questions, and to ensure that we share tips and best practice across the organisation. We hold drop-in sessions for one-to-one questions hosted by an expert from the partner organisation that we work with, and we make workplace needs assessments available to all staff. So we're about to enter our third year of partnering with exceptional individuals, which has been really tremendous.
Great, thank you. I think it's really important, the point that you raise about one of the, I guess, instigators was thinking about how do you even think about roles and the difference in roles, right, in order to accommodate. So I think that, along tying in with the fact that you had senior leadership buy-in, is really important as well. Yeah, thank you. So, one of the things that is needed if you're looking to either increase neurodiversity within the organization or be more neuro-inclusive is to actually understand who you have currently within your organization that might be neurodiverse, and how you might consider about looking for candidates and identifying candidates that are neurodiverse. So Laurie, maybe we start with you. From your perspective, how can companies think about approaching identifying neurodiverse individuals, both internally and externally?
Sure. Well, thanks, Sonya. There's a lot of good literature on this topic. Anybody wanting to look at this doesn't have to start from scratch. There's a lot of good literature. And a number of organizations that will give sound guidance on this, like those that Lucy has mentioned. One particularly practical guide is published by the CIPD called Neurodiversity at Work. And they start by saying that it's the attitude of mind which is the essential precursor to enabling businesses to benefit from the skills and attributes of neurodivergent people, and enable them to self-identify and be prepared to self-advocate, which is a rather fancy term for me for simply telling their managers and their workmates how they find the world of work works best for them. We do love our jargon in this industry, and there's some of that in neurodiversity as well as in investment and so forth. What CIPD say is that to be neurodiversity smart, firms should strive to develop a language and acceptance of neurodifference, and to celebrate and leverage neurodiverse strengths, whilst, and this is really important, taking steps to accommodate but not belittle any specific challenges an individual might face. And what that leads to is a culture where neurodivergent people not only can find their way into the workplace, but particularly important, those that are already here don't feel the need to mask. There is very well documented academic work on the huge stresses and negative effects on well-being and any differences in working or in supervisory practices that will be criticised. Somebody just popped up on the chat saying, could I share a link to that report? I'll put it on the chat in a minute. So getting a culture where people don't feel the need to mask is really the base level from which you approach identification. The other really important point is about line management. in all the conversations we've had, and we've had many thousands of conversations now with neurodivergent people, the thing that comes up again and again is the importance of first line management, being aware of and sympathetic to, and importantly, enabled by their superiors to be able to act in a way which makes sense. There is quite a lot of fear in first line management of moving from standard processes and procedures. They're worried about being criticised if they do. So they don't. So getting first line management, really understanding the situation is key. On a few specifics, make it clear on recruitment that your business is neurodivergent, aware and friendly. Make sure that the skills that you require in ads are really tailored to the role. Does every job really need everyone to be a good team player and have excellent communication skills? There are lots of jobs that don't, but most job descriptions have those things. Interview processes, telling people who they're going to meet, what the questions are going to be in advance. These aren't just things that are good for neurodivergent people. These are almost good, just standard good practice anyway. And avoiding closed questions. The classic for me was one person who told me that he was asked in an interview, have you ever had a situation where you had a really difficult relationship with a colleague? Now, we all know that that is a way of asking you to describe a situation, explain how you approached it and how you dealt with it. The person I was speaking to was autistic. When he was asked, have you ever had a situation where you had a really difficult relationship with a colleague? He just said yes. So having an open question, if that question had been, if you've had one, please describe the situation, would make a huge difference. These aren't big adjustments. These are attitude things. And the last thing I'd mention is on appraisals, as a matter of practice for everyone, not just people who you know or you think might be neurodivergent, if there are any adjustments that would make it easier for them to work. And those are just a few things. And I will put that link to the CIPD document onto the chat.
Yeah, thank you. And Laurie, I think we can, any of the links we can also provide out as we think about the Q&A at the end as well. So Meike, I guess from your perspective, anything that you would add to the points Laurie made about how to approach identifying neurodiversity within the organization and within the hiring process?
So yes, I feel very passionate in particular about looking at all these standard processes Laurie has mentioned, from recruitment, appraisals, promotion processes, and so on, because I think we have to be cognizant that we're talking about the brain here, and your brain is what defines you. It's who you are. So there's huge reluctance to talk about your motivations, your interests, your passions, your difficulties, and so on. And you really think about how much do I want to disclose in a way? How much about those really quite personal information I want everyone to know? So I think we have to, even if we create the perfect neuroinclusive environment, we have to expect almost that there is some reluctance, and people will think about what they want to share and what not. And therefore, creating this neuroinclusive environment, having standard processes that are flexible enough to accommodate different ways of thinking, working, communicating, that is key. And it is also really important because a lot of us work in global firms. The topic of neurodiversity is at different levels of maturity across the globe. There's still a huge stigma attached to it. So this does make it more difficult, even in certain areas, countries, for neurodivergent individuals to come forward and say, hi, actually, I'm dyslexic, or I just got a diagnosis of autism. How can you help me? What are the adjustments you could offer? And talking about adjustments, the third point for me is I got a diagnosis a bit later in life, and many people do. And if you've been masking all your life, if you have basically bent over backwards to make yourself fit in, it's incredibly hard to suddenly articulate, first of all, identify and then articulate what your needs are, what your preferred way of working is, because you have tried to fit into, to deliver to neurotypical expectations all your life in the educational system and your job. So that is a learning process, and I think that's the other thing we need to recognize. No one, gets a diagnosis, wakes up the next morning and thinks, oh, hello, this is, by the way, the long list of things which would have benefited me over the last 40 years. So those are a few things which then really point us towards our standard work environment. How do we handle recruitment? Laurie gave a few great examples and practical tips there. How do we interact, even those standard work situations like meetings, comms, trainings, and so on? All of that we need to review and broaden in a way to ensure that they work for many different neurotypes.
Yeah, thank you. I think trust is really important. And so just getting the conversation going internally, maybe, and making individuals and employees aware that there is a conversation, that there is a level of awareness. Hopefully, just in doing that, you'll have a few people maybe that will be willing to speak up, and they'll be able to provide insights that might then be helpful to kind of then generate even more individuals being more comfortable speaking out.
Absolutely. And those role models and empathy building exercises in town halls and huddles and so on, that is so important. And yes, we actually see quite a few people stepping forward after those. We've got some role models out there. Yes, definitely.
But could I just jump in and underline one of the things that Meike said? One of the groups of people that we're working with again is the Institute of Neurodiversity, which is led by Charlotte Valliere, who was herself late diagnosed as autistic and was the chair of the Institute of Directors. And Meike is working at a more ambitious level than us at GAIN. We're mainly focused on the UK at the moment. Meike is trying to change the paradigm across all sorts of businesses around the world. And she's doing some work at the moment for a session on autism for the United Nations. And speaking to her yesterday, she was saying that what she's trying to collect, and this is in part a request for help from anybody who could give it, is a collection of experiences of neurodivergent people, especially but not only autistic people, around the world. Because, as you said, Meike, the awareness of this issue is very different in some countries to that it is in the UK and the US, some parts of Europe, which is more ahead. And to that end, I asked a friend of mine who runs an educational charity in Zambia if she might be able to find from her connections somebody who is autistic who could do a 1-minute clip for Charlotte's video she's putting together on the subject. And she wrote back and she said, you are, of course, completely correct that neurodiverse people are marginalized in most countries in Africa. Here in Zambia, they would probably be told that they are mentally disturbed and taken to an asylum. This is a chronic issue around the world, and the investment community, for reasons I'll come to later, I believe, not just in their own businesses, but because of what they do, can be very important in changing that paradigm and that deep misunderstanding that lies behind that quote.
Thank you for sharing that, Laurie. Yeah, I agree. The more we can do, hopefully, the more it permeates across other organizations, other countries.
Sonya,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and add another point to this question about the identification of neurodivergent employees. Yeah. One very practical action that I think firms are beginning to take, and my last organisation, we were just rolling it out as I left, so I can't tell you how it has landed. But we were introducing accessibility passports. And I think one of the things that you mentioned there, Meike, was how tiresome it is to have to constantly present yourself and unmask yourself to a different range of people. And so through the conversations that our neurodiversity employee focus group has come up with, was to say, what is the mechanism that I don't need to constantly and actively have to do this? So we drew up a very simple template of an accessibility passport that just which is owned by the employee. And this was really important with our HR colleagues to think about the legalities and the GDPR requirements. So the employee owns the accessibility passport, and they can put onto there any of the sort of particular conditions that they would like to work within, how they get the best out of, one-to-one conversations, how they like feedback, and so on, as much or as little information as they wanted to provide. We coupled that with an accessibility toolkit for line managers and employees that was posted onto our internal site, so that they had some sort of reciprocal information. And as I say, I would have to follow up with my firm, but it felt like a really practical step that firms can take to really support neurodivergent employees from having to continually disclose and identify.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I saw also in the chat somebody mentioned from their perspective, they're neurodiverse, and they've brought it up with their employers, and the employer it was a very positive experience for them to report. And I think we actually did a survey through the Diversity Project of neurodivergent experiences. I believe it is on the Diversity Project website. And in some cases, people did indicate that they were maybe pleasantly surprised. They did get a more positive reaction maybe than they would have expected. So I think part of it is also just getting people comfortable that it's okay to talk about it, because that's the only way the firm will be able to support them, and that it does create sort of this butterfly effect of it benefiting more people ultimately. If we can, Natalie, to stay with you on the next question, related to how you've seen employers fill the talent gap using neurodiverse individuals. So, as more companies are experiencing gaps, and I think as more individuals are being diagnosed or identified with, sort of, I think, increasing levels of neurodiversity, it's really important for us to think about how do we do more to bring in the talent that neurodiverse individuals can bring to an organization.
Yeah, sure. So I think I would start by saying that at PGIM we work on the premise that cultures that enable people to thrive don't just appear, they have to be intentionally built. And as such, our approach to this and the pilot program that we've run has really been with that premise in mind. So it really started for PGIM about 3 years ago, and it was driven by two factors. One, the CEO of our fixed income business has 2 autistic sons and sits on the board of an autistic program at Rutgers University in Newark in the US. So he had been looking at what the university was doing around neuroinclusion and really wanted to bring some of that in. Simultaneously, our operations and innovation division was really having an open conversation about how do we apply innovation within our organization, and that led to the neat conversation about cognitive diversity and different approaches and different thought processes. So the two came neatly together. Honestly, 3 years ago, we opened up an internship opportunity, and we didn't take the time to really think through what the needs of individuals would be and how we needed to adjust some of our processes, right from assessment all the way through to supporting them in their experience in the organisation. And we learned a lot from the mistakes that we made as a firm 3 years ago. So about 18 months, 2 years ago, we thought we don't have the expertise inside. So we partnered with an external organization. Let's do this really intentionally and build it out. So we partnered with Neurodiversity in the Workplace. And we had a cohort of 6 individuals who all have disclosed to us that they are neurodivergent. Most of them are on the autistic spectrum. And we created a pilot program where they were brought in as contractors with a view to being offered a full-time role. What partnering with an external expert enabled us to do was really adjust our assessment process. And that was the first barrier is actually, and Laurie, you touched on this, is the recruitment stage and getting people into the organisation and fairly assessing somebody's needs, somebody's skills and capabilities. So the way that we changed it was from our sort of standard, as a lot of firms have, that your core competency interview kind of process. We introduced a 1-week assessment process where we gave a project, a very specific project focused around having a data lake, an unfiltered data lake, and inviting the candidates to use whatever tools they wanted, whether it was Python or Power BI or Snowflake or any of those mechanisms to really leverage, get as much analysis. We gave a couple of scenarios, as much analysis out of that. They had a week to deliver, to take their own initiative to drive that analysis and then present back the findings and the results. And I think shifting our assessment process in the first instance was a massive change for us, but it really gave us a much better view of the incredible skills and capabilities that this population had. So that was step 1. We brought in 6 individuals into our program. What we'd learned from the internship a couple of years previously was that individuals had felt really isolated. And so we purposefully created a cohort. And with that cohort, through the 6-month program that we've run, and it actually just finishes this month, they have had a weekly meeting coming together with their line managers to discuss, highlight any challenges, any things that are working well, anything that's not working well, and really have that opportunity to come together as a cohort and share their experiences so that we could learn from it. Alongside that, we gave their line managers some training ahead of the program starting, and the line managers have also had training delivered by the external partner on a weekly basis as well, and have also had a forum to share any challenges or concerns or gaps that they might have in supporting colleagues. We have tailored it to, we have identified specific roles, and we worked very closely with Neurodiversity in the Workplace to ensure that we were matching the right roles with the individuals. And the feedback that we've had from the cohort of 6 has been extremely positive, particularly welcoming the opportunity to come together. From our managers, we've also had some incredible information. In fact, 2 line managers who I got back in touch with in preparation for this said that they feel they would be better line managers to all of their employees now based on the experience that they've had. And it was really clear stuff around how to make sure that the inclusion principle is applied fairly across all of team members, how to give instructions, not using figurative speech, setting clear frameworks for how the work needs to be done and delivered and the time frame for it, and also really coming together as a forum to gauge what is working well and what isn't working well. So all of those sort of structures were put in place, and that was the benefit for us of using an external agency to support us in this, because a lot of these things we wouldn't necessarily have thought about initially, and it would have taken us longer to implement. So I'm pleased to say, as an outcome to this, we had 6 candidates join the programme, 4 of whom have now accepted full-time roles with us. 1 hasn't accepted a role with us, but has gone on to accept a role with Accenture, and 1 who has decided that they don't particularly want to work in asset management and have moved away. And then just to close out, a couple of the things that we've learned from this. The first one is that stigma and inertia factors really play a big part in stopping doing something. And it took us a good 6 to 8 months to really convince various parts of our organisation that we wanted to invest in this programme to make sure that we're doing it right and that we're learning from experts. We're also now thinking about, it's one thing bringing individuals in, it's one thing finding roles that meet their skill set and that they are comfortable and happy to deliver on. What we now need to look at is, and we're working with the cohort to identify how we continue to support through a much longer career path and career trajectory, so they have the same equitable opportunities to progression, to performance management, and you know, to change careers and move across. So these are some of the things that we're working through now.
No, thank you, Natalie. Those are really tremendous, like, and very practical, specific tips. And it sounds like it was really successful, given the fact that there's only one individual who maybe doesn't want to join asset management. I'm sure they learned a lot from the experience. Yeah. I think, Laurie, maybe you had a couple of examples. Maybe we could, you could spend just a minute or two on examples from other organizations that you've also been involved with.
Sure. I think the one I would like to mention briefly is Zurich, because it comes from the other side. That was a compelling story, Natalie. That really was. Comes from the other side, comes from the employer side, and shows the benefits from that point of view. And they had a problem in their data and coding area in their head office in Zurich, which was feeling insuperable. More by accident than design, they found an autistic person doing the job, and all of a sudden the job that was taking 3 weeks was being done in 3 days. Their German business that heard about this, and they had a similar problem and a similar set of needs, and they had tried all sorts of things, recruiting from competitors. They couldn't crack the problem. But when they heard about the success in Zurich, they looked specifically to find autistic people to do the role. They now have, I'm trying to give you the short version of this, 6 autistic people working in those roles in Germany. They've rolled out similar roles in Ireland, the UK, Italy, Zurich, and Germany now. They're looking at Hong Kong next week as the next step in the rollout. And their effort isn't just about autism and data. They're one of GAIN's strongest and earliest supporters across all forms of neurodiversity. And they say that the key to really getting this in and is there are 4 key stages. Proof of concept, which is judged by solid business results like those I've just described. Secondly, training. They've got a training program with 100 people across their different entities and territories working on this right now. Changing the approach from how can we make these people fit in to how is this good for us? That was a key attitude change. And finally, constant evolution, looking across the varieties of neurodiversity, along with other forms of neurodiversity, because there is so much in common with, if you do the right things for people who are neurodivergent, you're almost by definition doing good things for people with other forms of diversity. So as a slightly shorter version, I just say that if anybody on the call wants to speak to Zurich about their experiences in more detail than I have, not just in that specific, they are very happy indeed to share those experiences, either directly or as one of the forums that we run at GAIN for all the various people who are our members. It's really does work both ways.
Great, thank you, Laurie. And I assume they can reach out to you if they want to get connected in with Zurich.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked about the importance of culture and employees feeling comfortable speaking up. So I wanted to shift into how we would suggest going about educating employees and employers at all levels of the organization about neurodiversity and neuroinclusion, so that they can create a supportive and inclusive environment in the workplace. And so, Lucy, I was wondering if you could speak a bit to those points.
Yeah. So what we found is it's really important to have materials in a range of formats. So we have a variety of ways that employees can access information through our intranet, through Slack, paper-based resources as well. And then there's a spectrum of detail as well, from like a very easy to digest one pager, perhaps to help with and educate on vocabulary, but also much more detailed materials for those that want to need more information. And then we have podcasts, webinars that are recorded, interviews that are recorded that are all available as well. And then we share any other resources that come our way, like for example from the Diversity Project. And then we'll take feedback on those as well and have people contribute their ideas. So mentoring circle, for example, that might discuss the podcast that's been released, so that people can come and talk and digest and question as well. And then, I mean, the other thing we'll always use, which is often very powerful, is the storytelling. So how people have come forward, perhaps testimonials, how they've navigated their situations and their needs, and that then informs others. And then we also hold sessions for parents of neurodiverse children that have been really, really popular. And one thing that has come through from the education and information that we've given to employees is the importance of not stereotyping, and the importance of being people-led rather than labels-led, because, you know, everything is on a spectrum, and then, you know, 70% of people with autism spectrum disorder also have ADHD, for example, and then you'll have many people with ASD who have dyslexia. So rather than addressing or posting lots of labels on somebody, to look at all of their needs and focus on those.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The like intersectionality even within the neurodiverse community, and then you broaden that out to gender, which we also know can manifest itself differently. Neurodiversity in females versus males, there are sometimes unique attributes that can differ. So yeah, I think the most important thing, to your point, it's not trying to stereotype and meet all those stereotypical needs, but really understanding what the individual needs, but having just a holistic understanding of what it means and what the different variations of neurodiversity mean. Yeah. Laurie, not to put you on the spot for another quick synopsis, but anything from your perspective to add there as far as educating employees and employers about neurodiversity? Do we have you, Laurie?
Laurie, you're on mute.
There's always one, as you said, Meike. Looking at it from the employer point of view, two specific things. Key is understanding how your current processes for things like recruitment, supervision, appraisal compare with best practice in businesses like yours. One of the things that when we spoke to all the businesses in our sector to ask them what was most important in this area, the answer we got back was top of the list was a way in which people could benchmark what they were doing against what was best practice. So top of the list of the benefits and services we provide at Gain is just that, to find out where you stand and get a roadmap of how to get there. Normalizing the way that things happen so that they work better for neurodivergent people is key, and there, trying to do this as quickly as I can, the unique place that the investment industry can play in that, and it's not just within our industry, but it's across all sorts of industry and internationally, is the fact that the investment industry has its roots, its way into every kind of business in every country in the world. Now, one of the things we're specifically working on with the Diversity Project, with the academics at Autistica, which is a research charity focused on neurodiversity, is the concept of building a thing called the Neurodiversity Employment Index, or a rating system, which can be used by investment analysts as part of their assessment of a business's position in relation to the S of ESG. I mean, alongside other diversity characteristics such as gender and ethnicity, we all believe that diversity of thought is important to a business's long-run financial performance. And if we could get questions relating to workplace practices regarding neurodiversity into the standard toolkit of investment analysts, that would leverage the wide reach of the investment industry to propagate positive changes, not just in the industry itself, but across businesses of all types. We think the investment industry is uniquely placed to engender this paradigm shift. And we've got people like HSBC Asset Management, Aviva Investors, Mercer's, pension schemes from Lloyds Bank, UBS, M&G, Pru, working on this. We think it's really exciting and could be one of the things that makes the paradigm shift.
Great, thank you, Laurie. And again, we can share some of the resources and information after the call. So with the last question, maybe we'll just cover it off with a couple of minutes. So we want to talk about thinking about meeting the needs and making adjustments for neurodiverse individuals in the workplace. So Meike, I was wondering if you could comment on sort of what you've seen and suggest as far as best practice for making adjustments and meeting needs.
Yeah, I think the best approach, and we quickly touched on that, is really looking at the barriers in the workplace. What is it that prevents someone from being at their best? And as you indicated earlier, those barriers are often shared across the different conditions. So a lot of them rank around the issue that our standard work situations, our standard work experiences, they were set up to meet expectations, needs, preferences of neurotypical people. So, for example, the way we hold meetings, the way we communicate, mentioned trainings earlier and workshops, but also social interaction in the office. So one part of it is really being aware that these situations don't necessarily fit everyone's needs. And secondly, training up, and that's the more formal approach, training up your health teams, your occupational health provider on looking at neurodiversity and the associated needs that may be derived from certain work situations, not necessarily playing to the strengths of the neurodivergent brain. So having a proper reasonable adjustment policy in place, ensuring your health providers have guidance on what kind of adjustments to establish, how to get them in place, and so on and so on.
Thank you, Meike. And Natalie, do you have thoughts as well on adjustments for the workplace?
Yeah, I think broadly, what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for neurodivergent and non-divergent colleagues to have a workplace where they can do their best work. And when we think about DEI more broadly, that's the end goal that we're trying to achieve. So I think specifically with regards to neuroinclusion, it's emphasizing that through everything that we do, whether it's our policies and our processes through HR, as Meike, you were just alluding to, whether it's the building design, and really re-emphasizing your message by showing that you have created distraction-free areas for workspace. I saw an organization a couple of years ago had created, particularly in the hot desking environment, had created just these little stickers that a neurodivergent colleague could put on a desk to say, this desk is, I need this desk because it meets my needs, and I'll be in the office on a Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, or whatever it is. So really just creating that, making a pathway to make it as easy as possible for people. A colleague in my previous organization, who I worked very closely with, chose very voluntarily to put onto her email signature that she has dyslexia, and that consequently there might be spelling errors and so on in there, and it wasn't an indication of, you know, how capable she is at her job. So, you know, we put pronouns into our signatures, we put flexible working into our signatures. Maybe there's an opportunity to broaden that out and really, and invite people to do so, so that they then have that accessibility in everything that they're doing.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. I think to the extent that somebody's open to doing it, yeah, we sometimes put too much expectation or on grammatical and spelling errors. And yeah, I really do like that. Well, thank you so much. This ends the formal Q&A from a panel perspective. I did see a couple of questions that I wanted to just put out to you guys to see if you have thoughts. I think I saw a couple times people were curious about maybe how to go about approaching senior leadership. So maybe if you've got the middle management who actually does want to do more, but they really need support from leadership, are there any suggestions or recommendations for how to approach senior leaders to do more and build more awareness and initiatives within their organizations?
As there's a silence, and I'm an old salesman, so I can't abide it. If it was me, I would be pretty confident that some of those senior managers would be facing the same issues as the person concerned is facing. And we've had, I don't know, hundreds of conversations now with senior managers in different businesses that we've been talking to. And it is almost, you can always rely on the fact that if you raise the issue, the person that you're speaking to says, it's funny you should say that, but I have a son, a daughter, a cousin, a friend's son who is going through exactly that. So I think find the opportunity to have that conversation is the thing to do. And it does take a little bit of guts sometimes to say to somebody who's at the top of the tree, that I've got this thing. Is it familiar to you? But you can 90% rely on the fact you're going to get a warm response back. So don't be afraid to do it. I mean, it's if in doubt, ask the question.
Thank you, Laurie. Any other thoughts from the group as far as how to approach senior leaders to initiate more around neurodiversity?
I would completely echo that. In my experience, once you start the conversation, it's really well received, very warmly received. Senior leaders want their businesses to be excellent. They want their people to thrive in the workplace, and anything that takes you there is a welcome conversation. There is no shortage of examples on how this helps, and very, very famous entrepreneurs or leaders who have some form of neurodiversity. That information is out there. So if you felt like you did need to build some sort of business case before you went to a senior leader, James Dyson, Richard Branson, all of these people really famous and talk about their neurodiversity very publicly, but just reach out.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll probably end there today. The other question that was on the chat was about suggestions or recommendations for external organizations that can help. So I think what we'll do is, again, we'll look through the chat. We'll put together a document that has any of the links that we've referenced, anything else that we are able to share. We'll look at some of the questions that were raised about things that I know Natalie had mentioned. And then if there are further questions, you can send them to info@diversityproject.com. I think I've got that right. Also, feel free to check out on the Diversity Project website. There's definitely information and research out there. And then if anybody is interested, there's a roundtable that we're hosting on Thursday, specifically for neurodiverse individuals to speak more to others like them, but also to talk a bit more about their experiences in the workplace. So would encourage anybody to attend that as well. The information is on the Diversity Project website, and it's also been posted on LinkedIn. So thank you to everybody who joined. Thank you to the panelists. I think it was a great discussion. And yeah, let's keep the conversations and the actions going. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.